So if you're watching this video, that means unfortunately I'm still in pain and not able to come to school. That doesn't mean learning stops. So this is where we last left off, the last day we met last week. So at the moment, while we are going to begin our lesson, can I please have all your textbooks ready by your side? Open to page 30, I believe this is page 32 or 33. Okay, so let's go and do a quick recap. What is it that we talked about in the previous time, right? Here we talked about how different levels of technology will tell a person in that community whether it is a resource or not a resource, right? Technology in this case talks about knowledge, right? The level of knowledge. Wow, I'm writing this on a table that is very shaky, so it's very hard for me to write. But yes, the level of knowledge. So that means if, say, for example, you are in a low technology society, if you were to see a tractor, it's not a resource for you because you'll be looking at it and thinking it's a very expensive piece of metal, right? And on the other hand, if you are a high-tech person, you'll be taking a look at the tractor and see this as immediately, you know, this is a resource. And this is technology. It's very different from culture, because culture is all about their way of life. Here, no matter high-tech or low-tech, everybody needs all these things for food. So it is not a culture difference, it is a technology difference. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to belabor the point. We've already talked about this before. Let's move on. Okay, this was some of the stuff that we talked about when, as a farmer, what kind of resource that you need. Okay, there are certain ones that we circled out because these are natural resources. Remember the one that we talked about in class? Yeah, it should be last week itself, right? We were saying, why is it resource? Resource as in things that are useful. So I'm going to recap here. Natural as in, we don't say made by God, yeah, but at the very least made by natural processes. Yeah? So this is the definition of it. What is a natural resource? As we turn to your textbook, page 34 to page 37, can I please have you highlight? This is the definition of natural resources. Okay, the definition should have both the components. It cannot just be one, because if you just use one, this is resource, the first one. Second one, this is natural. So it would be weird if you were to just say, oh, natural resource is useful materials found on earth. That's not true, right? A tractor is something that's found on earth, also useful. So it becomes natural resource when it's produced by natural processes. For example, wood is formed based on photosynthesis, right? There is no such thing as tractor being formed by what the mommy tractor lay an egg and then the baby tractor come out, right? There is no natural process that results in a tractor being formed. Okay, so this is what makes a natural resource. Please make sure you have highlighted, especially both these components, and wrote down that this is a definition. Now, a natural resource can be categorized into two parts, either renewable or non-renewable. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here and take a look at some of these things. For example, wind, solar energy, right? These are some examples that we already know and we've heard before the expression that these are renewable resources. Yeah? On the other hand, we heard of oil, we heard of coal, we heard of land. It's limited. We don't have an infinite amount of land, so this kind of thing is not considered renewable resource. But let's go, we've already generally heard these terms before. Doesn't necessarily mean we are experts yet. We become experts today. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so these are the two ways that we can categorize resources: renewable and non-renewable. Yes, I'm going to read this out for you. Doesn't mean that I read means you get clever hawk. Take a look at your textbook, look for these terms, highlight them, and identify. This is the description of what makes a renewable resource. Okay, what this means is it can replenish. Replenish, if you're not familiar with the term, please circle it and write down. It is being replaced or being recreated. Right? Means whatever that you use is going to recreate new one. Okay, and it's being done naturally. Obviously, it's a natural resource, right? Naturally, more or less within the same time period that it is used. So what does this mean? It means, if say for example, right, you have a pond, right? And within the pond, you got 3 fish. Got mommy fish, baby fish, daddy fish. Okay, then after that, you are a fisherman and you happen to take one fish in a year. Then within the next year, so this fish is already gone, right? Within the next year, the mommy fish and daddy fish came up with two more new fishes. So then you go next year, you take up one more fish. Then the mommy fish and daddy fish make one more fish. So effectively, this means you are using it slowly, slow enough that it naturally, you can come up with more of this resource itself. Which means, you can see, right? You won't see it getting lesser and lesser. That is called naturally renewable resource. Okay? I'll repeat again. Maybe I give a different example. Let's use what do you call it? Wind energy, for example. Right? You make it spin the turbine, the fan-looking thingy. Then as it spins, then you generate electricity. Sorry, I'm not a teacher lah. Okay, like this is my turbine. Okay. So as it spins the turbine, you get the electricity. But is the wind renewable? Yes, because you use the wind that has passed by. In the next moment, there will be yet more wind that will pass by. So that means this is a renewable resource. Okay, effectively, if you use at a pace that the natural process can regenerate, that means you can consider it to be unlimited. You can keep using at the same pace. Yeah? On the other hand, a non-renewable resource is materials that are not replenished naturally, or more likely, they are replenished but very slowly. So either one is both correct. Both of them are non-renewable. Right? If say for example there's only one diamond left on earth and you take it already, means there's no more diamond left, right? So therefore it is non-renewable. Or you know how diamonds are formed? I don't know whether people know how diamonds are formed. You know this diamond, usually diamonds are formed by what you call it? Carbon something like what? The high pressure in usually volcanic areas, then the coal becomes diamond. Okay, if you don't know, that's how it happens. So if say this kind of thing, the volcano doesn't erupt every single year, right? If it does erupt, the high temperature, high pressure maybe can form what? 5, 6, 10 diamonds? On average maybe a year, 5, 6, 10 diamonds? But the person comes in and take out one time is 1,000 diamonds from way back then, all being reproduced. So you just keep taking the diamonds, take. So eventually it will run out. And if it can run out, means it is limited in availability. Yeah? The example that your textbook provides is crude oil and coal. If you're wondering what this is called, maybe you've heard this term before, very commonly used, fossil fuel. You know, the kind that used to pump petrol into your dad's car, the kind that is being used to the gas for your parents to cook Maggi. For me lah, I only know how to cook Maggi. Yeah, so fossil fuel. Okay, so these kind of things is again non-renewable because it's not that it cannot be created. Fossil fuel, if you're wondering why got the word fossil, right? It's being created because the dinosaur bones decompose and So it come out with fuel. So this kind of organic material that with carbon, which eventually gets burned because you get the heat and stuff like that. The idea is it doesn't regenerate that fast, right? We are burning based on the old dinosaurs that have already extinct for don't know how many generations ago. If we keep burning them, how long will it take before we finish it? Eventually, we will reach the point, right? And we are not going to replace with human bones that fast. So it's not that renewable. It's not replenished naturally fast enough. So as a result, we end up with fossil fuel being non-renewable. I give you a few more examples. Even say fish, right? If we end up fishing, but we fish like this fella, right? You end up fishing, one time you fish 3, then all gone already. By the first year, you're gone. The mommy, daddy, baby, all gone already. How can it replenish itself? So it's non-renewable. So it depends on how much we use it, how fast we use it, and how fast it gets replaced. Okay? So that is what's considered non-renewable resource. So I hope that's clear to you. If otherwise, you have your textbook with you, read through. Okay, you'll be able to familiarize yourself with the content soon enough. Okay, because what I would like you to do, what I would like you to write is just this. For each one of them, okay, rate of use is less or equals to rate of it being replenished. It means it is renewable. You use it slow enough, or is being replenished, is being replaced fast enough. This will result in the natural resource being unlimited. So it's now considered renewable. On the other hand, non-renewable will be the opposite. You use it too fast. Use too fast. But it is replenishing slowly, so less than. So this side is less than. Okay, so replenish, replace too slowly. So eventually will eventually finish. And when it finish, then no more. So then it becomes non-renewable resource. Okay? Imagine solar energy versus fossil fuel energy. Right? The sun will always be there. Even if, say, for example, one day the sun might blow up into a red planet and a red dwarf and whatever and all that stuff, right? That will still be like eons from now. So it won't be within our lifetime. So it is still being, the energy being generated by the sun is more than enough for what we need to generate solar energy. Okay? Let's move on, which is something that I want you to do. So next lesson, first thing I'm going to ask you to do is I want you to take out your textbook to page 37 and I want you to write down, is it renewable or non-renewable? Importantly, I want you to tell me the reason. You must be able to explain. Okay, so this is my test for you to make sure that you've been paying attention all along. And because we're going to move on to talk about something different now. Also related to the topic of natural resource, remember, is talking about how useful certain things are. Okay, we're now going to talk about how useful depends on, how do I say this? What perspective you take. Okay, because generally it depends. If, say, for example, you think, is humans more important or nature is more important? What do I mean by this? Okay, I want you to go through these three scenarios. Yeah, I know it's a story, it's a fake story, but it is still worth for you to look at and see the perspective that these characters are holding, because there are people out there who have this exact same perspectives. First one, person A. Okay, for him, he sees natural resource as resource, legitimate resource. So here we go. What's nature for if it's not as a resource for us humans to use? If it's ever depleted, I'm sure technology will find some way to replace their functions. Right? If, say, for example, we keep cutting down the tree, there's no more tree left, then we just create habitats out of something else for the animals. Yeah? I say we should not, okay, this person at least, I say we should not stop human development for these trees and squirrels. So obviously to him, human may be a bit more important than that. Okay? We move on. Take a look at this character B. Maybe a bit of an opposite perspective. He's saying we should not touch the trees at all. Okay, these trees are precious and for the long term we must preserve them at all costs. Meaning, if people need resources, they should look elsewhere, like creating new materials instead. So we don't entertain just because a person says the tree is needed for something. It doesn't mean straight away we must listen to them. We should ask them, go and create something else that you can use. Don't disturb the tree. Nature should be left alone. This is person B. Then, finally, there's a person C. Okay, a person C would say, we can have it all. Whether we are talking about development, long-term use of resources, we can have it all. So, for example, how about we use these resources but we replace them? Like replanting the trees that we cut down. This way, nothing needs to be compromised. But, of course, this is easy to say. It doesn't mean that everybody will do. Right? I mean, when we hear this, we'll be thinking, yeah, that's the perfect perspective to have. But it's not easy. Many companies may cut down more than they plant. Alright? So if you were to imagine, looking through their perspectives, where does it fall within this spectrum? Nature-centric versus human-centric. Right? A saying, nature is a resource. B saying, we cannot touch the tree. And C saying, we can use but we replace. Okay, take a look at this. Give you a minute for you to think. Where do you think they fall within this spectrum? Okay, maybe not a minute lah. I think it's fairly straightforward lah, quite easy lah, right? Okay, so it falls like this. A person who says we should not touch the tree at all is very nature-centric. he really sayang the trees, really sayang the nature, the squirrel and all that, must make sure that this wildlife ecology is not something that we exploit. On the other hand, this person A is a lot more human-centric because he views everything in nature is just a resource and that no matter what, technology will be able to catch up, not to worry. So this is human-centric. So you can see, right? Each one of these perspectives, the person may be having the same culture, maybe having the same level of technology, but if they view the resources in this perspective, this would still mean nature is being used differently. Right? For example, human-centric, if the person says nature is a resource, eventually we will finish all of the resources because everything can be used. Yeah. On the other hand, a person who is nature-centric may suffer from the opposite problem. If, say, for example, nature cannot be touched at all, this would mean development might be limited. Right? You cannot build houses immediately. Rich countries, sure, they can maybe use 3D printers to print a house. But in a poorer country, means what? They cannot survive, there's no shelter. That's not fair, right? Yeah. So each one of them may not be the best thing. Good to have a balance, but doesn't change the fact that people do have this kind of perspectives. So I'm going to pause here. I want you to think. Now you know what's nature-centric. Now you know what's human-centric. Where do you think these kind of stakeholders will fall within this spectrum? Stakeholders meaning people who are involved in the use of nature in this case. I'm still pausing. Don't worry, the video didn't hang. Think, where would the country government be? Would the country government think more about the human-centric perspective or nature-centric? How about the youths, right? You know, the person who's talking about climate change and all that stuff and how the governments are terrible and all these old people, they don't know how to protect nature. Where do you think they fall within? Okay. International companies, right? Where do you think they fall? Companies, say for example, international one like Nike, right? Where would they fall? They need the resources, but they are also an international brand. People know them. And commercial loggers. Commercial loggers means people who cut down trees for a living. That's where they get their money from. Where would they fall? Okay, this one I don't have a fixed answer. Truth be told, it is something, it depends on perspective. It depends on your opinion as well. For sure, more likely, commercial logger would be more human-centric, right? The tree is their source of income. So they literally need to cut down the tree, right? They don't need to care about anything else. They just need to care where the money come from. Okay, youths concerned about their future, more likely to be nature-centric because they want to survive, right? If climate change happens, then there's no more land, then what are you going to do? Swim? Right? Then country governments and international companies will fall somewhere in between these two lines. Right? Country government need to care about the people, but the country is not just made of people, it's also made out of the nature that's there, the environment that's there, that they must also protect. An international company, like I said just now, they are worried also about their image overseas. Yeah? So, effectively, how does this affect people's view of their environment? This is within your textbook, page 38 to page 39. Right? A nature-centered person views the purpose of physical environment is to be protected. On the other hand, a human-centered person will be saying nature, physical environment is for people to use. Different, right? This is a very good way for you to compare as a table. If you find the information in the textbook with a lot of words, it's a bit hard for you to digest, feel free to draw this table up. You need to pause the video, then need to ask, see whether the teacher can pause. Similarly, I will find some way to share this video link to you. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. Okay? How about consequence? Consequence meaning what is the eventual outcome? Alright? If people keep treating nature the way that it is, what will happen in a nature-centered view? The nature will be preserved. Right? So natural resource is minimally used, or you reduce whatever resource that you're already using until eventually maybe you don't even use anything at all. That will be the best case for them. Yeah. On the other hand, a human-centered one will end up with depletion. What's the definition of it? The use of natural resource is faster than natural renewal. Remember we talked about a non-renewable resource eventually finish. This is what happens when it finish. Okay, this will result in this term called environmental degradation. Alright. So again, feel free to pause if you need to record this information down. But let's move on. Okay. Last bit is talking about how to sustainably use your resources. So what does it mean? A resource to use sustainably, it means that it must still be available in the future. Based on this word, sustain, right? It can tahan for a long time. That means in the future, you will still have the same thing that we're talking about now. So you must use it in a way that can still be around. For example, the fishing example, right? If you were to fish all the fish in the first year, then it cannot replace itself. It's not sustainable. On the other hand, if you force yourself to eat carrots and maybe fish once a year or twice a year, at the very least, the fish still got a chance to survive. Yeah? So, when we see sustainability, we can see sustainability when it comes to future, right? Future as in what? Next few years? Can tahan for 2-3 years? Good enough for you? Or we consider 10 to 30 years from now, or even longer than that, next generation and all that. Yeah? So when it comes to using resource sustainably, this is where we bring up the 3 R's that we are very familiar with: reduce, reuse, recycle, which is something that I'm very sure you're all very familiar with. You've been exposed to this a fair amount in primary school. Okay, the only difference is I'd like you to consider this new term, the 4th R, which is recover. So what does this mean? So while reduce, it means you don't use. Reuse means what you use again. Recycle means whatever you use, you convert it into something else. Yeah. Recover means the things that you don't convert, the waste products, we use it to make something else. Yeah. So what do I mean by this? You say, for example, making our excess food, you know, the kind of food where you eat the food, then after that all the belly, all the bones and all the stuff that you don't want to eat, the organic material, it gets into this process called composting, right? Where the food will decompose and eventually it can become fertilizer for plants to grow. Then it is something that you're using out of the waste. It's not that you are repurposing, it's not like you're recycling it, but rather it is definitely waste product that you are using for a different function altogether. Yeah, so this is an example of recovery. Okay, which of course it depends on the technological development, right? Like we said just now, certain countries may be very capable of saying we don't want to use certain resources because we can do 3D printing, right? We are able to replace the use of certain materials with something else to make things more sustainable. But it depends on technology. Because if, say, certain countries are not there yet, so they haven't discovered certain methods yet, so then the environmental footprint will be a lot larger. Okay, so this is all for my video on what we are learning for chapter 2. I wish that I was there so we can make this a bit more engaging, right? Can, you know, my usual raise hand that kind of stuff. But if we can't, we at least maximize the learning opportunity. Please make sure you record this information and I figured it out. Maybe I'll create a Google Classroom and I'll share this with you. Should be able to access using mobile devices. Yeah? Alright.